This is something I looked for 8 years. This is an original handle for an Axelson lathe. It goes right here. Almost every Axelson you ever see, this is missing. And there's a good reason it's missing. They called it a ball knocker. As you're using this, if you'll notice the relationship to certain parts of the male anatomy, a lot of guys took it off. Well, when you're sitting here running this thing and you're peeling off some metal and it looks like this, big hot chunks come flying at you, and the next handle to turn this off is way on the other side of that spindle 5 feet away. It's pretty handy to have a handle right here that can stop that spindle. But people take them off. Imagine they take them off and they lay them in that tray, and over the years they get lost. Well, this one was made probably in about 1950. That's the model of the one I took it off of, which I paid $200 for this. And I was proud to. And then I went and got a puller and pulled it off and brought it home to this one. Now, I figured somebody may have, just wanted it on the next one, but the way it looked, that other one was going to be scrapped pretty soon. So I saved this handle. I actually looked for one of those handles for the 16 that's over at Don's shop now. I never have found one of those. The story of this came from a tool shop in Houston, an oil field shop that had 400 machinists. When COVID hit and the oil went down because nobody was driving, there was a lot of machine shops in Houston that serviced the oil field industry that went out of business. This came from one of those. There's a link up here to when I brought it home. I like Axelson lathes. They were built in Los Angeles, California. They were arguably one of the finest lathes ever built. They had lots of inventions that nobody else had at the time, like this little lever right here. That allows me to set stops on the cross feed. You can adjust them all, set it up, do that, slide over to it, it'll hit that stop, pass it down, and you can go on past it. It was the way things were done to speed up operations before we had CNCs, before we had numerical controlled stuff of any kind. Over here is another invention. I don't know if y'all can see. Need to be higher. This tailstock. Put the handle over here on the side instead of over around in the back. And then they did something even neater. Can you see the front here on this? When you turn this, see how slow it goes? Put it in second gear and you can go to town. Stuff like that, Stuff like that. Another thing I looked for years was steady rest for 16s. I finally found them here in a place in Houston. In fact, if anybody needs one, that back one over there is for an 18-inch that I brought home. This is a 20-inch one, The 18 will work on here, and I'll keep it if I really need to. I'm not going to ever scrap it, that's for sure. Too hard to find. We found a steady rest for Don 16 that used to be mine. When I got this one, I didn't have enough room in the shop. And I figured the 20-inch will do the same thing as the 16. So Don bought my 16, took it over, and I still go visit it once in a while. He painted it all up. This one will probably never get another paint job in its life, unless I get really bored. That's okay. Got a nice retirement home here. It doesn't have to make any money. Doesn't have to run except for little fun projects. It's nice to have. You know, this thing can't compete with today's machinery. It just can't do it. It's not fast enough. CNC. But there are things I can do on this lathe that you just can't do on another lathe or a CNC. I can walk up here and just do a fast operation and be done with it. Don't have to program you. Just give it some oil, some electricity. I'm going to give it a bath pretty soon. But other things have taken precedence. I wanted to get this on here before it gets lost again. Axelson was bought out by a much larger competitor, and I'm not really sure which one it was. I had heard that Monarch did it, but someone told me, I think Brian told me that it wasn't Monarch. It happens to a lot of companies. They go in, they can't compete, so they buy you. And then they say, oh, everything's going to be really good. We're going to change nothing. Everything's going to be just the same. Then a year later, they lie through their teeth and they shut you down. Been doing this for quite a while, and I remember back in the 90s, a friend of mine turned me on to a drafting program that I could afford. Is like $600 or $700. Back then, Autodesk and their products were the standards. Boy, were they expensive. And I just couldn't afford their product. That's all it was. Just couldn't afford it for what I was doing. The program was called Generic CAD. And man, once you learned how to use it, it was really easy to draw with. It had 2-letter commands that you could just type in quick and just start doing anything you wanted to do. It was so good that it was hurting that big company's sales. So here they come. Yeah, we're going to buy you. They bought them. Everything's going to stay the same. Then a year later, things weren't the same. They closed them down. That's why to this day, I'll never buy an Autodesk. That's why I don't use Fusion 360, because I knew what they had done before, and I figured that once they got everybody sucked into using it for free, they had turned the tide, and that's what happened. Something doesn't go in much farther than that. And I'm afraid that it's this little Allen screw has dimpled the inside of that. So I'll go get a round file and see if we can make that go in there a little bit nicer. Somebody's already beat the shit out of this. Excuse my French. Get a round file. I'm back. Did you miss me? Sometimes finding parts for these old machines just takes forever, especially when they don't make them anymore and haven't since 1954. Supply of Axelsons is going downhill. There was a company here around Houston area that had all the plans for them and could make you any parts you wanted. It's expensive, but you could do it. Well, COVID got rid of a lot of companies around here. Somebody bought them out. I couldn't afford to find a place to store all those plans, or I sure would have done it. Last I heard, they were in a storage container somewhere in South Houston. There we go. That was it. Yeah, look at that. Oh, baby. Now I need a key. I had a key. Where did my... There it is. This key was in some of the tooling that I found when I bought Bob. You never know what you're going to need later on down the road. And look here. Bob is going to help this Axelson become whole again. Ooh. This thing is curved in a specific way. It's got a curve that comes this way, and the ball sticks out so you can get to these two easily. And then it's got to go down and get past that chip tray. It's an elegant curve, don't you think? We don't have a lot of this stuff sometimes. Oh boy. I don't feel it engaging. I hope it works. I do feel it engaging. I just don't know if it engages on this square rod or this octagon shaped rod down there. Got to go through this machine. This is leaking some oil out. Don says it smells like an oil refinery when I'm running it, but I'd rather that than hear the squeak of metal like it did on his Bridgeport. Got to work on that thing. This old lathe, I haven't ever thought of a name for it. It's got a 25 horsepower motor. It's a 20-inch swing, which in the old days, 20-inch meant 22.5-inch swing that I could turn on it. So I live out in the country. We don't have true three-phase here, so I have to run our rotary phase converter. So I'm going to go turn that on, and then we'll see if this thing will engage. Now I'm getting ready to make the final part for the Kingway on this, and it's kind of weird. It's got a little few parts sitting around here. So let me get this cleaned off. Thing's clear. I did that, the handle fell down. All right. You're clear, you're clear, you're clear, you're clear. It's warmed up a little. Houston, we have a problem. When I bought this machine, it was making chips the day before on the floor. They had 16 Axelsons they were selling, all different shapes and sizes, and Brian Block told me I should have bought the 25-inch. Well, I was fighting for space as it was. But it turns out he was right. I should have bought the 25-inch. It wouldn't have been that much. And there's been a few jobs that I needed the 25-inch and didn't have. So, Brian, you were right. Now, this has got lots of oil in it. Since I moved the Bridgeport in this space to be working on it, it's about an 80-foot walk one way to get to the two toolboxes that I moved out of here temporarily. And of course everything I needed today is in those two toolboxes. See if this will pop it out enough. Coming, it's coming. That's a long piece of a lot of tall drink of water. But I have hopes because this whole thing is coming out as a unit. I'm hoping I can just rebuild that bushing. I don't know how, but part of this job is figuring out how to do things. There we go. Well, the bushing's still in here. It's completely disconnected from that. Uh-oh. Crap. I think this whole thing has got a pinion gear on the back of it. Take you back and show you, but I can't bend over that far. But if I do this and push that back in, it engages on that pinion gear. And that gear is stripped out. Not the gear, but where it's broached through here. Unfortunately, to get that off of here, I'm going to have to take the apron off. Well, unfortunately, we're at a stopping spot. I have to do some things, and I think my hypothesis of why this is missing so much is because that part gets worn out. Scarf and junk gets on this shaft, and just over the years going back and forth, because it rotates against this thing every time. Well, it doesn't rotate, it slides on it every time, and as much junk that gets on these things, I think it just abraded itself to death. Then it got looser, and then as this corners went around it, it just ate the rest of the inside out. To get this part out, how would you do it? What we've got here is this handle. It is set screwed onto this shaft. It goes through the bottom of this apron and is attached to a pinion gear back here, and I can see some set screws right there. And if I move the shaft in and out here, I can feel it moving. In fact, it's kind of moving on that shaft. I can feel it, it's loose. So I'm almost certain that if I pull this shaft after undoing these screws, that pinion will come off of it and then allow it to drop down. And if that happens, I think there's enough space for this broached, hex-shaped, I don't know what you'd call that. It's got a pinion gear on the back, and I don't know if it's bolted to it or not. The worm drive is on there. But if I pulled that off, I could slide it that way. Ooh, some more worms. Okay. We got that off. That goes into that. This broached bushing is attached to a gear up underneath there. I'm trying to show you that. Let's see if I can spin it. Let's see if I can spin it with this. Does that look? See how it's turning on that? It's worn out. It's had so much junk on that shaft over the years, it's just wore that out. Doing this so I can see if there's a way to get that gear off. Well, after reviewing the last little piece of video you saw, I come up with another idea. As I was turning this gear around and disengaging it, I saw that there are some set screws that when I push this back in, I might be able to disengage that drive gear and then just slide this way. That would make it a heck of a lot easier, because then I could just take that support for those shafts off down here, slide them out of the way, make sure the bearings and everything are all okay in that, and then slide this out that way. Turn a new one. That looks like to be at least an inch broaching job. I don't have anything like that. Of course, I didn't have a big ass lathe like that either. Things turn up. I think that's my strongest possibility for success, with the least downtime. Let me know what you think.